Aaron James never imagined her life would include owning any kind of house, let alone a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged to someone from a different world. With barely over $1,000 in her bank account and exhaustion from double shifts weighing down her every step, she had grown used to the constant ache of survival. Yet the deed sat in her trembling hands, stamped and official, as if daring her to believe that something impossible had finally chosen her. The lawyer who issued the documents barely met her eyes, as though he couldn't understand why anyone would willingly take responsibility for a property that everyone whispered about. The building inspector had warned her not to step inside alone, and the real estate agent had practically laughed when she signed the papers. But desperation had a way of making a person bold, and Aaron knew she needed something, anything, that could change the trajectory of her and her son's lives. What she would uncover inside the decaying estate was far beyond rot and ruin. Hidden in its shadows was a secret that would reshape everything she believed. She first saw the notice pinned to a courthouse corkboard, squeezed between lost pet flyers and estate sale announcements. Most people didn't bother glancing at it, but when Aaron stopped, it felt like fate tugging at her sleeve. She wasn't at the courthouse for anything exciting, only to pay a parking ticket she couldn't afford, while her 5-year-old son, Danny, clutched her hand and eyed the tall hallways with quiet curiosity. The words, $1 property sale, seemed like a misprint, a joke, or a cruel trap. But Aaron was too close to homelessness to ignore even the faintest sliver of hope. For 3 days, she had stared at the eviction notice taped to her thin apartment door, trying to figure out how she would explain sleeping in the car to a child who still believed his mother could fix anything. The listing described a single-family home, built in 1983, located at 427 Blackwood Lane. The grainy photo on the flyer was barely legible through faded ink, but the outline of a large structure with tall windows and a peaked roof intrigued her. Curiosity pushed her to search the address online. The very first link she clicked was a local forum thread warning people not to waste their time with the Blackwood property. Commenters claimed it had been abandoned since the 90s, deteriorating year after year. Someone else mentioned the original owner vanished mysteriously, and locals insisted the place was haunted. Aaron didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in overdue bills, bounced payments, and the harshness of reality. Still, she called the number on the flyer. The county clerk confirmed the sale was real, the price truly $1, but the buyer had to assume more than $8,000 in back taxes and take full responsibility for repairs. The clerk clearly thought Aaron was delusional for even considering it. $8,000 felt impossible, but the idea of a permanent home, a place of her own, planted itself inside her like a stubborn seed. The following weekend, she drove out to Blackwood Lane. The neighborhood began normally enough. Tidy lawns, small houses, flags fluttering lazily in the breeze. But the farther east she traveled, the more isolated everything became. Trees crowded in close until the sunlight dimmed, creating a tunnel of shifting shadows. When her GPS announced her arrival, she almost didn't see the driveway at all. It had been swallowed by weeds and wild growth, the gravel stones buried beneath layers of neglect. A rusted mailbox leaned drunkenly toward the road. She told Danny to lock the car doors and stay inside as she pushed through the tangled vegetation toward what little she could see of the house. When the mansion finally came into view, it looked like a forgotten giant slumbering beneath years of decay. The structure stretched across the property with an uneasy mixture of elegance and ruin. The once sharp geometric angles of its 80s architecture had faded into warped lines and broken symmetry. Windows were cracked or missing entirely, leaving dark wounds across its face. The front porch sagged as if sighing under the weight of abandonment. Vines had climbed the walls, weaving themselves through the siding and reaching toward the roofline. Yet beneath the destruction, Aaron sensed something extraordinary, a dignity that had survived time, storms, and neglect. Even in its broken state, the house felt alive, waiting. A white pickup pulled up behind her, and a man in a county inspector's jacket stepped out, introducing himself as Harold Finch. He looked at the house, then at Aaron, with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news. He listed every flaw with practiced certainty: compromised foundation, ruined roof, mold almost guaranteed, failing electrical systems, unreliable plumbing. Once inside, he confirmed the worst. rotted floors, water damage, nests from animals that had claimed the house long before she arrived. He warned her plainly. This wasn't a renovation project, it was a demolition waiting to happen. But when Danny pressed his face to the car window and shouted, "Mommy, is that our castle?" something fierce and unshakable ignited inside Aaron. She considered everything Harold said, every warning, every number. $70,000 in repairs? Maybe more? It should have ended the dream immediately. But her life had taught her that sometimes the impossible path was the only one left. She looked at the towering mansion again, not as it was, but as it could be, and chose hope over certainty. She told Harold she wanted to buy it. 2 weeks later, through an exhausting process of loans and paperwork, the deed was finally in her hands, and without fully realizing it, she had just stepped into the beginning of a journey that would transform not only her future, but the future of many more than she could ever imagine. Moving into the mansion for the first time as its owner felt nothing like triumph. It felt like stepping into the belly of something ancient, wounded, and waiting. Aaron arrived with borrowed tools, cheap cleaning supplies, and a determination so raw it bordered on reckless. The moment she crossed the threshold, the stench struck her, a suffocating blend of mold, animal waste, and stagnant air that clung to her throat. She tied a bandana around her face, squared her shoulders, and forced herself deeper inside. The entryway, once designed to impress guests, now resembled the aftermath of a long-abandoned shipwreck. A grand staircase curved upward, its wooden steps missing in places, its banister loose enough to wobble at the slightest touch. To her left, a living room lay draped in dust and decayed wallpaper. To her right, a dining room held a chandelier so coated in grime that its crystals resembled grey stones instead of glass. Every corner whispered of neglect, but also hints of what once had been. Something elegant, something worth saving. The first hours of cleaning were brutal. She ripped away wallpaper, shoveled debris into bags, brushed aside years of leaves and nests. Each small improvement felt like pushing back the dark with a single candle. The mansion resisted her, creaking ominously, shifting with the echoes of her footsteps, as if deciding whether to tolerate her intrusion. But she returned the next day, and the next, and every day after that. She scrubbed until her knuckles split, patched holes in the walls as though stitching wounds, and dragged out broken furniture that collapsed under its own weight. On weekends, she brought Danny with her, setting him up with snacks and crayons on the front porch while she worked inside. Slowly, as days turned into weeks, the house began revealing its hidden beauty. Hardwood floors emerged beneath dirt and grime. A once ruined kitchen showed glimpses of tiled craftsmanship that must have been stunning when new. For the first time in years, she felt like she was building something that belonged to her. Yet, for every step forward, 3 new problems surfaced. The basement stairs were so decomposed, she feared they might crumble under a single footstep. One upstairs bathroom had a gaping hole where the waterlogged floor had rotted away completely. Insulation in the attic practically disintegrated into powder when touched, and she suspected asbestos lingered within. Every time she patched a wall or repaired a window, something else collapsed or revealed hidden damage. The townspeople noticed her efforts but offered mostly pity disguised as politeness. At the diner where she worked, customers smirked when asking about her castle. Her landlord raised her rent without hesitation, knowing she had nowhere else to go. Even the bank sent her warnings about late payments with unnerving frequency. But through all of it, Aaron remained steady. She had survived far worse than unpredictable plumbing and creaking floorboards. This house was her lifeline, her last shot at giving Danny a childhood not defined by instability. Despite exhaustion, she learned to patch drywall using online tutorials before sunrise. She learned to replace shattered window panes with the guidance of a retired contractor who frequented the hardware store. She learned to sand floors, identify load-bearing beams, fix minor leaks, and rewire simple fixtures. Her hands toughened, her posture straightened, and her spirit, though often weighed down, did not snap. Evenings were spent bent over diagrams and repair guides. Mornings began before the sun. Her whole life became a cycle of work, hope, and grit. Yet by the end of 3 long months, the entire ground floor looked almost livable. Cream-colored walls replaced the torn floral wallpaper. Clean floors replaced heaps of debris. A thrift store sofa sat proudly in the living room, and for the first time, laughter echoed there. When Danny ran across the open space, the sound felt like a promise, a future forming one room at a time. It wasn't until she began repairing the second story that the house offered her something unexpected, a secret that shifted her world. She was kneeling in the room she claimed as her future bedroom, prying up damaged floorboards softened by years of neglect. One board slid free more easily than expected, revealing a sliver of leather beneath. She reached down, expecting maybe an old wallet or forgotten toy, but instead pulled out a water-stained journal, its cover embossed with faded initials. Her breath caught as she opened the fragile book. The handwriting inside was impossibly neat, each line methodical and deliberate. The very first page read, "Project Log, Day 1. If you found this, you're already paying attention. You'll need that skill." A chill moved down her arms as she flipped through more pages filled with diagrams, calculations, notes about energy conversion and magnetic fields. Interspersed between the technical writings were cryptic messages. The banks refused to fund it. They called it impossible. But I know what I'm building. I've hidden pieces throughout the house to protect them. If you're reading this, you must earn the next one. The final entry took her breath away. Dated March 15th, 1991, it read, "They're coming. I don't know who sent them, but they know what I've created. I won't let it fall into the wrong hands. The house will guard it until the right person arrives. Someone desperate enough to fight for the future." At the bottom of the page, a sentence pointed her toward the next clue. "Start in the library. Seek the books that don't belong." Aaron stared at the walls of the room as though they might rearrange themselves. She had bought the house believing it was simply old, neglected, and haunted by nothing but rodents. She never imagined it contained secrets planted by a brilliant mind on the brink of discovery. Her heartbeat drummed with excitement, fear, and disbelief. Her mansion, her impossible $1 gamble, contained something far more valuable than wood, nails, and paint. The next clue was waiting, and she knew she couldn't ignore it. This was no longer just about repairing a home. It was about unraveling a mystery left behind by someone who trusted the future to a stranger brave or desperate enough to find it. And Aaron, who had walked into this house with a trembling heart and nothing but grit, felt a spark ignite inside her. A spark that whispered, "You were meant to find this." The moment Aaron realized the storage room on the second floor was actually the library mentioned in the journal, something inside her shifted. She had walked past the room dozens of times without noticing anything unusual, just empty shelves, dust, and the lingering scent of old paper. But now she examined the space with new eyes, searching for anything that seemed out of place. One section of shelving caught her attention. The wood looked slightly newer, almost like it had been replaced more recently than the rest. She ran her fingers along the edges, tapping softly, and heard a hollow echo behind it. Her heart pounded as she pressed her shoulder against the frame and pulled. To her shock, the entire bookshelf swung outward like a hidden door, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. For a long moment, she simply stared, feeling as though the house itself had finally decided to trust her. She texted a coworker to call for help if she didn't respond in 2 hours, then grabbed her heavy flashlight and began her careful descent. The stairs led to a basement, unlike the ruined one near the kitchen. This one was purposeful, structured, and remarkably intact. Concrete steps gave way to a wide underground chamber that felt more like a workshop than a cellar. When her flashlight swept across the room, objects she didn't recognize glinted in the beam. Oscilloscopes, coils of copper wire, unfinished circuits, spools, meters, and more equipment she had only seen in documentaries. A large shape stood at the center of the room, draped in a heavy tarp that seemed untouched by time. On the far wall, a massive corkboard was plastered with papers, formulas, diagrams, photographs, scribbled notes, and blueprints that hummed with the mind of someone frighteningly brilliant. She moved toward the board, captivated. One photograph showed a wiry man in his 50s, eyes bright with ambition, holding a glowing orb that defied explanation. Another photo seemed to show the mansion itself when new with the same man, Victor Chon, standing proudly before it, unaware of the future that awaited him. Aaron's breath caught as she studied the diagrams. Even with her limited understanding, she could tell these weren't ordinary machines. The blueprints illustrated something intricate, layered, and groundbreaking, an energy device that operated on principles she'd never heard of. Magnetic resonance, quantum field interaction, sustainable loops, words she had to whisper aloud just to believe they existed in her hands. Every journal entry she'd read upstairs suddenly made sense. Victor hadn't been paranoid, he had been protecting something revolutionary. She turned toward the large object covered by the tarp and, with trembling hands, pulled it free. Dust billowed up around her, and as it settled, she stared at a machine unlike anything she had imagined. It resembled a generator shaped by the hands of an artist. Copper coils wrapped elegantly around crystal-like structures, metal plates joined with mathematical precision, wires feeding into a compact panel that must have been the control center. For hours, she explored the underground workshop, reading Victor's meticulous notes. He had been a visionary, an engineer who had broken away from traditional research because he believed the world didn't need permission to change, it needed invention. His writings described a device capable of generating clean, limitless energy. Not solar, not wind, not coal. Something entirely new. Something that, if it worked, would alter the course of human innovation. But Victor had realized too late that others had found out about his breakthrough, people who wanted to own it, suppress it, or exploit it. His last entries were filled with desperation and resolve. He had scattered pieces of the prototype throughout the house, embedding them in walls, floors, and hidden compartments. Only someone persistent enough, someone like Aaron, would ever find them. Climbing back into the library, Aaron felt both electrified and terrified. She returned to her small rented room that night with the journal in hand, unable to sleep as she reread each line, each clue. The next hint told her to search the section of the master bedroom where the sunrise hit, something she had never considered. The following morning, before dawn, she arrived at the mansion. She stood in the bedroom as golden light crept across the floor. When the sun reached the far wall, she began tapping, listening for the hollow ring she now recognized. After 10 minutes, she uncovered a metal box containing a circuit board and another journal filled with Victor's calculations. The note inside gave her the next clue: where children laugh the loudest. Immediately, her mind raced through the rooms she had explored. Which space carried the faintest echoes of play? That weekend, she brought Danny along and explained that they were searching for hidden treasures left by someone who used to live in the house. His face lit up at the idea, and his laughter filled the empty halls as he ran from room to room. When they reached a second-floor room with unusual acoustics, a space where Danny's giggles bounced strangely off the walls, she knew they were close. Behind a loose board in the closet, she found another box. Inside were more schematics, another essential component of the device, and a third clue: the heart of the house sees all but reveals nothing without light. These riddles guided her like stepping stones along a river she'd never thought she'd cross. Over the next 3 months, the mansion became a fusion of renovation site and scavenger hunt. She found hidden compartments in places she never would have imagined, in attic beams, beneath fireplace stones, inside banister posts, even under the steps leading to the back porch. Each discovery deepened her awe. The more components she uncovered, the more she understood the shape and purpose of Victor's creation. At night, she studied physics lectures and joined online forums to decipher the complex language of energy theory. Her notebooks filled with diagrams recreated from Victor's journals. The house was no longer just a structure. It had become her education, her mystery, her destiny. By early autumn, the device was nearly complete. Piece by piece, she assembled something that belonged more to the future than the past. She didn't know whether it would work, but she felt Victor's presence in every step, every clue, every worn page. She was not just fixing a home anymore. She was finishing the masterpiece a forgotten genius had begun. And deep down, she understood something terrifying. If Victor had been hunted for this invention, then she was walking the same dangerous path. But unlike him, she wasn't alone. She had her son, her determination, and a courage she didn't know she possessed. And soon, she would have answers. By the time the leaves outside turned shades of amber and rust, the machine in the hidden basement stood fully assembled. Aaron had spent every spare moment aligning coils, adjusting panels, cleaning crystal components, and studying Victor's diagrams until they lived in her mind like a second language. The device looked both elegant and intimidating, an intricate fusion of copper, metal, glass, and geometry that hummed with silent potential. She felt a strange sense of companionship with it, as though Victor had left behind not merely his invention but a living echo of his mind. Each part she installed carried a whisper of his brilliance. Now the final step remained: activation, and that step hovered over her like a cliff's edge, full of promise but also danger. If the device failed, months of sacrifice would crumble. If it worked, nothing about her life or the world would remain the same. She chose a Friday night to attempt the activation, knowing Danny was safe at a sleepover across town. Standing alone in the basement, she studied the machine as though preparing to speak a sacred language. Victor's journals described the sequence clearly. A car battery would provide the initial power to spark the magnetic field. Once established, the field would trigger what he called a quantum cascade, a self-sustaining loop of energy that would produce far more power than it consumed. It sounded impossible. It sounded miraculous. Yet she trusted Victor's precision far more than she trusted the doubts gnawing at her. With trembling hands, she connected the battery cables, watching the control panel flicker to life. A soft vibration traveled through the floor, like a sleeping creature stirring. The first switch brought a faint glow to the copper coils. Soft amber light pulsed gently, illuminating the room with a warm shimmer. It felt like standing inside a heartbeat. She swallowed hard and flipped the second switch. The hum deepened, vibrating through her chest. Victor's old oscilloscope, still functional after decades, began displaying spikes as the magnetic field formed. When the yellow indicator light on the panel turned solid, her breath caught. Only one switch remained. The one that would decide whether Victor's dream was genius or delusion. Whether her months of grueling work had meaning, or were just the misguided efforts of a woman desperate for hope. She closed her eyes, whispered a shaky prayer, and flipped the final switch. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Just the steady hum, steady glow, steady trembling under her feet. Her heart collapsed inside her chest. She thought it had failed. Then, without warning, the basement erupted into clean, brilliant white light. It surged out of the device like a sunrise contained within a cylinder. The air vibrated. The crystals illuminated like stars. The coils glowed brighter, but the battery remained untouched. The energy was now coming from the machine itself. The red indicator light turned solid. The cascade had activated. It was working. The device was running on its own. It was generating power from seemingly nowhere. Aaron covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She laughed, half in disbelief and half in sheer, overwhelming relief. She had done it. They had done it. She and the man who had vanished decades earlier. For the next hour, she tested everything she could, documenting readings the way Victor might have. Each restart produced the same result: initial charge, field formation, cascade ignition, stabilized, continuous energy. It felt unreal, like witnessing a miracle that wore the skin of science. When she finally returned upstairs, her mind spun with possibilities. She couldn't keep this to herself. But she also couldn't trust just anyone. Victor's notes made that painfully clear. He had vanished because others wanted his invention for themselves. She, too, risked danger now. She sat in her small rented room that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing she was no longer just a single mother renovating a broken home. She was the keeper of a scientific breakthrough with the power to shift the world's future. Over the next days, she carefully reached out to experts. Most ignored her, some dismissed her. One professor suggested she seek counseling for delusions. Others politely declined after hearing phrases like quantum cascade or infinite clean energy. She felt foolish each time, questioning whether anyone would ever believe her. Until nearly 2 weeks later, she received a reply from Dr. Rebecca Foster, a physicist from MIT known for exploring unconventional energy theories. Dr. Foster's message was blunt. The idea sounded mathematically familiar, and if Aaron was serious, she would be willing to visit. For the first time, someone didn't laugh. Someone didn't dismiss her. Someone listened. She eagerly agreed to the meeting, and the weeks leading up to it stretched into an anxious blur. When Dr. Foster finally arrived, her expression held a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Aaron led her through the mansion, now half restored, half ruins, and into the hidden library. The moment the physicist saw the concealed staircase, her skeptical facade cracked. In the basement, surrounded by Victor's notes, she went silent. She examined the diagrams with growing intensity, muttering equations under her breath. And when Aaron powered on the device and white light filled the workshop, Dr. Foster whispered, "Oh my God, this is real." For the next 2 hours, she tested everything she could, electricity meters in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. When she finished, she sat heavily on a stool and said words Aaron never expected to hear. "This invention could change the world. Do you understand what you have?" Aaron wasn't sure she did, but with Dr. Foster's help, she began to. The physicist assembled a small, trustworthy team, engineers, researchers, a patent lawyer, and together they verified the machine's functionality, documented every detail, and filed the early stages of legal protection with Aaron listed as the discoverer and owner. Offers began trickling in from energy companies, first small ones, then enormous amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars, then $1 million. But Dr. Foster urged caution. "This is bigger than you," she said, "but you get to decide how the world receives it. Don't let anyone steal that control from you." For the first time in her life, Aaron had power, real power, not through force or wealth, but through discovery. While the world quietly began to rumble with whispers of the breakthrough, Aaron's personal life shifted too. The once mocking townspeople treated her with awe. Newspapers wanted interviews. Drivers slowed down in front of the mansion, craning to see what miracle had unfolded inside. Yet despite the attention, she still worked her 2 jobs, still struggled with bills, still questioned everything. The device was revolutionary, but her life was still catching up. When a major renewable energy corporation offered a partnership deal, not a buyout, Dr. Foster finally nodded in approval. This was the one. The contract promised a substantial payment upfront, ongoing royalties, and a foundation established in Victor's name. For the first time, Aaron allowed herself to imagine a life where she could breathe, where Danny could grow without fear, where the world might be kinder. The day Aaron signed the partnership contract in Boston felt unreal, like watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. She sat in a sleek conference room surrounded by experts, lawyers, and industry leaders. Yet all she could think about was the small rented room she and Danny still went home to every night. When the final signature left her pen, the room erupted in polite applause, but Aaron barely heard it. All she could focus on was the quiet weight of the moment, a weight made of hope, responsibility, and the unspoken promise that her life was no longer anchored to survival alone. Danny sat beside her, his tiny hand resting confidently in hers, unaware of how extraordinary the moment truly was. When the lawyer slid the finalized documents across the table and said, "Congratulations, Ms. James. You've just helped change the future," she felt the truth settle into her bones. Victor's invention would finally see daylight, and the world would recognize the genius hidden within the walls of her broken mansion. Returning to Millbrook that evening, Aaron parked in front of the house she had once been embarrassed to claim. But now, with its new windows, reinforced structure, and flickers of warmth returning to its rooms, it looked almost proud. The mansion no longer felt abandoned or resentful, it felt awake. She and Danny carried sleeping bags inside for their very first night, truly living there. Furniture wouldn't arrive until the following week, but that didn't matter. The house didn't need perfection, it needed people. They ordered pizza, sat cross-legged on the dining room floor, and watched the fading sunlight spill through the freshly cleaned windows. Danny's laughter echoed through the halls, filling empty spaces with life in a way no renovation ever could. For the first time, the house felt like a home, not a project, not a burden, not a gamble, just home. When night settled, they climbed the rebuilt staircase to the master bedroom and set up their makeshift beds. Danny was asleep within minutes, but Aaron lay awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the soft creaks of settling wood. She thought of the woman she had been when she bought the property, tired, frightened, scraping together every ounce of courage she had left. She had walked into a collapsing mansion with nothing but stubborn hope, never imagining the hidden laboratory beneath her feet, never imagining she would rebuild more than walls. She would rebuild her sense of possibility. Downstairs, buried below concrete and shelves of forgotten notes, the device hummed with a steady glow, powered by its own miracle. It was a quiet guardian of her future, a reminder that even the most impossible dreams could take shape when someone refused to let go. The next morning, sunlight streamed across the bay window, painting the room in warm gold. Danny was already awake, gazing out at the messy yard scattered with overgrown bushes and fallen branches. "Mom," he said softly, "we should plant flowers, and maybe trees, and maybe even build a tree house." His voice held the kind of certainty only children possess, the certainty that anything is possible now. Aaron joined him at the window, seeing the future he imagined unfold like a blueprint in her mind. "Yes," she whispered, "we'll make this place beautiful." As she said it, she realized it wasn't just a hope, it was a promise. And for the first time, she felt capable of keeping it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Foster. "Team meeting at 10. We're outlining the global rollout model today. Get ready. This is bigger than any of us expected." Aaron smiled. Not a fragile smile, not the sort she used to hide behind at the diner or force when life felt unbearable. This was a smile built from endurance, from triumph, from finally stepping into a life where fear wasn't the only constant. She texted back, "On my way," then turned toward Danny with a heart full of gratitude. This house, this once cursed estate, had become the crossroads between her past and her future, between Victor's unfinished work and the world's need for something better. Years later, when journalists asked Aaron why she bought a collapsing mansion for $1, she could never quite give an answer that captured the truth. It wasn't logic, it wasn't strategy, it was instinct, the kind of instinct born from desperation and hope intertwining in equal measure. Victor had hidden his masterpiece in a house built like a puzzle, waiting for the right soul to walk through its doors, someone patient enough to uncover its secrets, brave enough to ignore the doubts, and determined enough to chase meaning where others saw only ruin. Aaron had been that person, not because she was special, but because she refused to give up. She refused to let her circumstances define her future. The mansion on Blackwood Lane was no longer whispered about as haunted or cursed. People drove past to admire its restored windows, the gardens she and Danny planted, the lights glowing warmly at night. Energy researchers visited from around the world to see the birthplace of a revolution. In the basement, Victor's device, now replicated globally, continued to hum quietly, a living testament to the power of curiosity, persistence, and courage. Danny grew up running through the halls his mother rebuilt, never knowing a life defined by instability or fear. And Aaron, once a struggling single mother with a handful of dollars and an overworked heart, became a symbol of possibility itself. The house had found its person, and she had found her purpose. Two broken things, one human, one home, had rebuilt each other piece by piece, and in that unlikely partnership, a new future was born. Not just for Aaron and Danny, but for the world. All because she had taken a risk no one else dared, believed in a dream no one else saw, and listened to the silent call of a house waiting for its story to be finished.